My name is Matthew Todd, and welcome to Inside the Scale Up. This is the podcast for founders and executives in tech looking to make an impact and learn from their peers within the tech business. We lift the lid on tech businesses, interviewing leaders and following their journey from startup to scale up and beyond, covering everything from developing product market fit, funding and fundraising models to value proposition structure and growth marketing. We learn from their journey so that you can understand how they really work, the failures, the successes, the lessons along the way, so that you can take their learnings and apply them within your own startup or scale up and join the ever-growing list of high-growth UK SaaS businesses. Welcome back to the podcast. Joined today by Felix Laumann from NeuralSpace. Felix, great to have you here today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Matt.
No worries. I'm looking forward to the conversation. To kick things off, can you tell us what is NeuralSpace? What is it that you do?
Yes. So NeuralSpace is an NLP, what means natural language processing company. We work on both text and voice, and we automate all kind of different things. So we all have used Google Translate, most likely. That's one of the tasks that fall under NLP, but there are also many more. For example, voice transcription, when you automatically generate subtitles to a meeting, what lots of servers can already do right now, but also many more, like what is called transliteration, translating between different alphabets, automatically extracting keywords from text, or even finding the meaning out of a text snippet that could be, for example, used in a chatbot. All of that we do in more than 100 languages, and our specialty is in these locally spoken languages in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa.
Okay. And we'll get into more details about how the platform works, I'm sure, but why go after those localized languages? And, what led you to try and create this in the first place?
Yeah, there are really not that many solutions to support these languages. That's number one. So, like just recently, I think about a year ago, also Microsoft and Google moved into these languages, and they all say now they have more than 100 languages in the offering. However, it comes down to how accurate your models are for those languages, right?
Yeah.
So when we have all used Google Translate, or we've all used some kind of voice transcription service, we always see they're never 100% accurate. There are always some small mistakes in it. And these mistakes are already present in English, although there are not that many, but the more local you go, the more mistakes there generally are. So you really have a huge difference between an offering by NeuralSpace, which makes maybe 10% or 8% of all words as a mistake.
Yeah.
But then you have an offering by Google or by Microsoft where you have like 30% of all words being, for example, wrongly transcribed. And 30% is a huge number, right? So we really speak here of every third word or every fourth word versus every 15th word. And that's obviously a huge difference. Because very often it's either post-edited by a human that obviously requires less time when you get it more accurate in the first place. But very often it's also really like a vital information, right, or vital services. So when there's, for example, a chatbot that allows you to book an appointment for your COVID vaccination, how it was in India, you want to get that 99% correct, right?
Yeah.
Because people want to get access to these vaccination appointments. So really the accuracy matters a lot in low resource languages, and that's why NeuralSpace is really uniquely positioned.
I see. And what was it that led you to try and tackle this kind of problem in the first place? Was it something that you'd personally experienced, or just an opportunity that you saw? Yeah,
there were two really big influences, I would call them, or really, really big realizations that led me to work on this. So first was the technical challenge. So you generally deal with a lot less data than what you have in English, or let's say German, what is my mother tongue, and French and Spanish. You have 1% of data. In, let's say, an Arabic dialect, in Gulf Arabic, you have only 1% of data than what you would have in English. So
yeah.
It's a technical challenge, which makes it just out of my technical mindset very, very interesting. But secondly, the impact that we can have when we provide accurate solutions in those languages. So there is, when I was lucky enough to travel to lots of countries where where one of these locally spoken languages are spoken. And I saw very often that people do have a smartphone and they do have internet access, but they're very often forced to use it in English, although they really are not comfortable in English or they really barely speak it. So still the keypad was in English. Still when they wanted to access like WhatsApp, the WhatsApp interface, right, is actually never in a local language. So lots of things I saw where, wow, okay, these people have access to technology, but then they're forced to use it in English or French in some countries. So that really I was thinking, okay, well, when we provide that local language support, we can really make their lives a lot easier and hopefully even make them adapting technology even faster.
Yeah, I see. So how long was it then between spotting that problem and validating it, having something that you were convinced would provide a solution to some of those problems?
There was actually quite some time. I would say, let's say 1.5 years to almost 2 years.
Yeah.
It was because we needed to build the technology up from scratch. Really, there was nothing existing. We had some academic research where we were thinking about like using it. In the end, we really developed everything ourselves. We have them published academically by ourselves as well about the technology that we developed. But it really took some good effort to get it all into a, let's say, product-ready shape, right?
Yeah.
There were some earlier results, obviously, which were purely research-based, but not sellable as a product. But then it actually took 1.5 to 2 years to really make a product out of it.
Yeah, and was that a single language you were targeting at that point, or were there multiple languages you were looking at?
We were looking at Indian languages, and there were 11 locally spoken Indian languages that we tackled in the beginning. That was partly because we had early market traction, or let's call it interest, from companies in India. My co-founder was Indian, so it was a bit easier for him to actually understand or human validate what our models were predicting. And we then just said, okay, let's tackle India first. So there was 11 local Indian languages, and then we expanded over time. So it takes us about, I would say, 3 months to add a group of, let's say, 20 more languages, 15 to 20 more languages. We normally tackle them in groups. Very rarely we only add one new language. So we then just added more languages over time.
I see. And were those initial paying customers then from your existing network and your founders network?
Yeah, that was. So it is a bit of leap of faith what I take in you as well, right?
Yeah.
So that personal relationship helps a lot. It's still very risky to buy from a startup because who knows, right? Maybe in a year they're not in business anymore, then you need to rewrite your entire technology stack and all of that. So it was my personal network, and we then also had quite good license jump for them. Let's call it that way. Yeah,
I see. And how many different languages are you supporting now, and what kind of regions are you now working in?
There are nearly 100 languages that we have actually now. India is still very much one of our most attractive markets. It's just a huge language diversity what they have within the country. So it's not only a different dialect; they even use different alphabets.
Yeah,
and that's obviously very difficult to build accurate technology for those. Secondly, the Middle East, we have 7 different Arabic dialects in our offering right now. That's also a market where people generally mix languages. So that's always very interesting for us, and also people do that in other countries, but they mix Arabic with English, or in Morocco and Tunisia, they mix Arabic with French.
Yeah.
So that's obviously very difficult, especially for the voice technology that's at the moment existing in the market, to transcribe that accurately. And we are about to release, actually in 2 weeks, we are about to release the very first models that are out in the market that can accurately transcribe these, what I call code mixed or code switching languages.
I see. That sounds really interesting. And in terms of commercializing the technology, then, did you look at providing, products that you would license access to, like a SaaS platform of some kind, or were you providing access to the technology via APIs, etc.? How have you approached opening that platform up and commercializing it?
Yeah, we were actually looking what are the big tech players doing, and really adjust that model more or less. So we charge per API call or per minute of speech, right? When it's kind of a permanent API, let's call it that way, when it's a streaming API that is always running, then we just measure how many minutes of speech we are actually transcribing or how many minutes of speech we are generating with the synthetic voice. That has been kind of what the market has been being used to. We have had some requests where people ask just for a license, so unlimited usage over 1 year.
Yeah.
As a startup, we are quite flexible, right? So we are not that quick, not that associated with very strong processes that cannot be changed. So we're generally very open to what works best for the customer. But the per API base is what has the big tech adapted and how they sell. And we just wanted to have the least change for our customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of the big tech companies then of Google and Microsoft, it seems like you're very much starting out with, some of the biggest tech companies in the world as a potential competitor. How do you feel about that? How do you approach trying to compete with those companies?
It's actually, so totally honestly with you, in the beginning, I did not think it's that big of an obstacle. So it's just incredible with what kind of credibility and trust these companies come, right?
Hey, so we're back now. We just had to change headphones. You lost power on those. But before we did get cut off, you were just talking about going up against Google, Microsoft and the like, and how you are differentiating yourself.
Exactly. So these big tech players enjoy a huge amount of credibility in the market. And that's like totally understandable because they will be just around for the next 20 years, if not even longer. And these services will be running for the time. Where we can differentiate as a startup, and I think that's not only applicable to NeuralSpace, is providing the personal support and being quite flexible in what you offer, right? So, for example, we have had a few requests by customers to provide on-premise installations of the technology. The big tech providers will most likely not do that.
Yeah.
Secondly, or it's like a huge multi-million-dollar contract, right? So there's really something that you can offer as a startup, which a big tech can't provide. And also just being really flexible with your processes. So when a customer wants to have an unlimited license, it's something what you can do, right? It doesn't need to have whatever 5 layers of approval by anyone. It's just like what you can offer. That's kind of what we try to do at NeuralSpace, but it is obviously like very, very difficult.
Yeah. And in terms of finding customers, we've had some other people on the podcast founding companies that rather than providing a service that consumers, whether it's B2B or B2C, that will use directly, they provide an API to allow access to their technology. We've had a couple of people with those kind of products that we've spoken to before. How do you approach finding customers for APIs? Because they need to be building or integrating at that point. So I can imagine it's potentially pretty difficult to get the awareness to attract customers. How have you approached that? Yeah,
it's indeed very difficult. What we have really been doing is kind of generally, like speaking broadly about NLP and about what can be done with NLP, and then kind of get that, let's call it like business buy-in first.
Yeah.
And then having, we integrate that through an API because that's like the easiest way to do it. When you just go like an API first sales, that's super difficult even like to someone who's coming more from business context. It's very much like what value will you bring? Okay, and then just see the API as a means to integrate it.
Yeah.
Instead of here's an API and you do with it whatever you want. I don't think like API first sales really work. It's probably more of a marketing generating demand, and then people like technical people go in themselves, read the documentation, then do it themselves.
Does that mean in terms of inbound versus outbound that you're more inbound focused in getting a lot more customers that way?
When we do also outbound, but the inbound is brilliant because people already know like we are a potential solution to their problem, and it's not just about like how we can best serve them and how they probably don't only contact us, right? So there are obviously a bunch of competitors, and then how we can differentiate from them. It is that we try to have as many inbound as possible. It means we try to speak at conferences. We will quite soon do more marketing campaigns on social media. But it's still like heavily also on outbound reliant, right? People very often don't know what the technology can actually do, and then you need to explain them. You need to actually show them that they have potential to improve processes.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine with a new technology or a new technology going into new markets, enabling new things to be achieved from a technical perspective, there must be a lot of education required in order to let those people know that actually that something is possible that they didn't know about before.
Yeah, 100%. We do regular like webinars, office hours, and all of that, which are more on the education side.
Yeah, I see. And in terms of growth of the platform and features and advancing it, moving it forward, how do you balance innovating from a feature perspective versus doubling down on the accuracy versus adding more languages? I can imagine there's quite a few different things potentially in competition with each other there.
Yeah, that's very true. We try to listen to customers as carefully as we can. Number of languages, I think we are somewhat settled, right? So with these nearly 100 languages that we have right now, I think we cover like 98% of the world population in terms of like mother tongue, what they speak as a mother tongue. And we just say, okay, it's fine. There were very few that we actually do not cover and have had customer interest in, and we may add, let's say, another 10, 20 over the next 6 months, but then we're pretty fine. That's kind of maturing. The other two are kind of definitely in competition. So improvement on accuracy is something what we try to do, especially for the speech technology, because that's where at the moment the most accuracy improvements can be done. And there we have now dedicated like a mini team that only works on that. And then we have also a second kind of more of a user experience team where we add features like downloading data sets, like uploading them easily, uploading different formats and all of that. So they go, they can are sometimes a competition in terms of what is more in focus, but overall they can go quite often simultaneously.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of AI platforms and language processing platforms, emerge in the last couple of years alone. What do you think are the next kind of set of innovations that will be possible building on top of what we've now been able to get to?
A very good question. I wish I knew, Matt. What I could guess, so I'm just like thinking about the general education of the market, right? So people know more what is fast, it's NLP, but people know more what is computer vision, what can be done with it. I'm thinking that people take like these developments that can be done with the technology more in-house. What means, we are kind of happy with a self-serve tool. We just need a flexible platform that can do lots of different things. And then the easy integration. So I think we see that already in the American and the European market. In the kind of more developing countries that we tackle, we don't see that yet, where people really do that heavy technology development in-house. but we see it already in Europe. So people want to have a quite flexible platform. They can do lots of different things. It may be, so people have been calling it multi-modal learning, so machine learning.
Yeah.
What means they take more than one source of information in, right? So you can take in from a video, you can take in the images, and you can take in the sound to make a joint decision. Okay, that's potentially, I don't know, someone being abusive to other people on the street, right? So you can take in multiple sources of information. That at the moment cannot be really tackled with one platform. So companies really need to go into a computer vision company, into an NLP company, a voice company, and then kind of put these APIs together. And I think that's still quite difficult. So kind of that merging of technologies to one platform, I think that will be coming in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I remember, reading a few articles and listening to a few podcasts from the founders of Twilio, who provide, SMS text-based messaging, but also video-based communication APIs, I guess you could call them. And, similar to yourself, they started off having a platform and, offering SDKs, APIs that people can call to use their infrastructure and technology. But the applications that people were building were, very diverse, and certainly not the types of applications that they thought people would be building with it. And often had never even considered. And it's like a layering approach, isn't it? As people start to build things, you suddenly realize what can be done and what new use cases emerge. And as you say, combining technologies as well, what else can be done. And it just helps to advance, all kinds of industries by opening up these APIs to people, I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. No, fantastic. And in terms of your journey so far then with NeuralSpace and thinking of our audience of startup and scale-up founders as well, what are some of the lessons you've learned along the way that you think could be useful for our audience to hear?
Yeah, there are lots. Whoever thinks about starting a company, or whoever started a company, I pay highest respect. So it's an exciting journey, but it also is like a very emotional and stressful journey.
Yeah.
So I think it was yesterday I came across that video on YouTube where someone has interviewed who are now like billionaires who started companies when they were young, and they're all now 60, 70 now. And there was one very interesting quote where somebody was saying, you should like what you do, but it's actually not good when you absolutely love your company. Because then it comes very often to a stage where like the company owns you instead of you own the company. And what he meant by that is that you make decisions that just keep kind of the dream of the company alive, what could maybe lead to not tackling the right market or never achieving product market fit, right?
Yeah.
Because you have kind of that imagination in your mind of the world, that the world evolves in that certain direction, but actually never goes in that direction, right? So when you absolutely love the company, and the idea of the company owns you and takes control over how you make decisions, you lose that objectivity, which is very healthy as a founder. So you should own the company, what means you should let it move in a direction that you believe is right and that you have assessed as objectively as possible. So that was a very interesting quote. And he was also saying, I liked what we did, but I followed that idea because I saw huge market value and huge amount of money for him personally in the end. And that was really what was driving him. So people say, okay, money should not be the number one reason why you start a company, because you need to believe in the bigger and so on. Definitely, you need to believe that the world is moving in the direction what you are then partly building. But having an objective mind on your ideas and on your hypothesis, how a market is reacting to your product, is extremely healthy. And that requires a lot of like challenging yourself, which can be actually very painful. At least it was for me. So I had that strong belief, and then oh shit, it doesn't really work out that way. So you need to do a pivot or a mini pivot.
Yeah.
But it requires like thoroughly questioning your own assumptions on how you believe the market is reacting, or how you believe your initial target customers are reacting to such a product. And for us, it was the case, okay, well, they actually react quite badly to our product, so we need to position ourselves differently. Luckily, the technology is quite flexible, so it didn't take a major pivot, but we definitely need to position ourselves slightly differently. There will be lots of sleepless nights, especially when you ask yourself if you followed the right approach over the last couple of weeks. And yeah, it gets very personal. So don't even believe much in a work-life balance, I would say. You will think about your company as a founder, like nearly 12 hours, or probably even more every day. So really, the private life suffers from it without taking any kind of without really putting any kind of filter on me. It does suffer, and you need to be okay with it, and you need to merge kind of your private and your professional life, I would say. So most employees are very close friends now of mine, for example, which is nice, which makes it durable, which makes it, I'm not seeing that I really like usually suffer my social life. Friends I have outside of the company, obviously, see social interactions suffer quite a lot. But yeah, you take some sacrifices for it. Hopefully you really fulfill what you have been hoping to achieve, and then it's probably worth it. But yeah, it doesn't come for free.
No, absolutely. I think that's really good for people to hear that. And yeah, I like what you were saying about the attachment to the company, but I think also to the product that you're building as well. I think a lot of founders can start off doing the right thing, spotting a problem in the market, but then immediately jump to a solution, and then through confirmation bias and everything else, just seek out information that confirms the solution is right. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes not truly listening to market feedback, and then being slower to respond than is ideal, or potentially limiting opportunity based on what the market is telling them.
Yeah. What I also find very wrong in doing, what I've seen a couple of times already, unfortunately, is where people say, like, the customer's just not ready for my product yet.
Yeah.
Right? Or I need to educate the customer more so they like my product. It's like, it requires a huge amount of effort. Like, it's not scalable, right?
Yeah.
You can't acquire 1,000 customers, and you need to educate every single customer how to use the product, or what is the value of your product. So it's much quicker, although it's personally more difficult. Why don't you adjust to the market, right?
Yeah.
So instead of trying to really educate every single customer, just go into that direction. And maybe you have not a product that is as fancy and as technologically advanced, but it's what the market needs. Generally, I would say, like, people, it boils down to people. You can say, okay, the market requires time to change and all, but it boils down to people. They need time to adjust and be comfortable with a new technology, because change always is something very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it just requires, especially for larger companies, it requires to have processes slightly rewritten. And yeah, you can't then kind of challenge existing processes too much. So you need to be just a little bit ahead of what's possible at the moment, but you can't move like 10 years ahead, and then ask everyone to adapt to the technology.
Yeah, I think patience is so important. I think in attempting to get traction, or to build, or to scale, or whatever goals founders have set themselves, I think people can often try and rush things, like, we need to do more marketing, we need more sales, we need more inbound, we need more outbound, whatever it is. They can sometimes seek those results too early, and then get frustrated, and maybe changing tactic then when they don't immediately see the results that they want. But I think, sometimes you do need patience and time for the market to engage with you, to adapt, and for you to take those learnings as well. And I think if you are willing to be patient, then actually, even over a course of 6 months, you can end up in a far better position than if you're just trying to rush it every week and every day.
I totally agree. There was also one example which I'm thinking about quite often. There was, I'm not sure if they're still live, but basically what it enabled people to do is a kind of writing a paragraph, and then there's a full website generated for you.
Yeah.
Right, which is like fascinating. Okay, you write a paragraph, and some kind of language model in the background understands the topic and then generates images according to that and all of that. I doubt like any company, potentially like a very small business, actually puts all their trust into such a very, let's call it, abstract technology, right, where you really like lose any kind of control. So what works now for web development is probably something like Wix or WordPress, right, where you have kind of a no-code tool, but you still have very much control of everything what happens. So that is for me like, okay, there's not yet product market fit, and potentially whatever in 10 years people really trust and people just want to generate a website in 5 minutes. But it's an example of, okay, like there's too much innovation happening at once, and I don't think many companies are actually able to or willing to adjust to take that risk.
Absolutely, and I think some people, especially with a lot of AI that's emerging at the moment, can try and take it a few steps too far. And as you say, like automate everything for me, whereas actually the real value is in, do the boring bit of getting started, get me 70, 80% of the way there, and then let the person take over and give them tooling that augments and enhances their experience rather than replaces it, I think.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you for taking the time. I think it's really good to hear, both sides of things, really, from, how you've been able to build up NeuralSpace, the technology, the way that you've been able to differentiate from those big technology players, but also then, hear some of those challenges that founders do have to address as well. So thank you for sharing those today.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me, Matt.
No, it's been a really interesting conversation, and I look forward to seeing how NeuralSpace moves forward and maintains that differentiation against those competitors. So thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Inside the Scale Up. Remember, for the show notes and in-depth resources from today's guest, you can find these on the website insidethescaleup.com. You can also leave feedback on today's episode, as well as suggest guests and companies you'd like to hear from. Thank you for listening.